welcome in to the next installment of the HoopStudy Masterclass. Tonight we have head coach Ben Thompson from Emory and Henry. Coach Thompson has had an extensive career so far at a young age, has bounced around, got his start at Virginia Tech. But the very first question that we have tonight, Coach, tell us about your journey and how you got here today pouring into the HoopStudy community.
Yeah, I grew up in the house of a coach. My dad was a longtime high school coach, won a state championship in 1991 at Lebanon High School in Virginia. And so kind of grew up in that atmosphere. And, we still have pictures when I was telling my age here, but when I was like seven, I think it was 7 or 8. That's when he won it. And as he was going to get the state championship trophy, there's pictures of him holding me while he was getting the trophy. So, kind of grew up around it. Didn't think that I wanted to coach. Went to Virginia Tech to become an architecture major. Hated it. I was in it for a year, missed basketball, wanted to get back into it. And so I started working the camp circuits, which isn't as popular as it used to be. Working the camp circuits, and then got on staff as a student assistant, student manager at Virginia Tech. Got my GA there, and then was a Dobo at UNC Greensboro and a D2 assistant at Pembroke, St. Leo, LMU, D1 assistant, recruiting coordinator at VMI, and then head coach at SUNY Canton, and now head coach at Emory and Henry. So it's probably should have owned stock in U-Haul at a little bit younger age, but in a good spot now.
Yeah, so I think it's unique too. I, like yourself, started off as a student assistant, a manager. I was at Radford University right up the road from you. Talk about what that meant for you going into each practice, working with those athletes, and the pride that you took in your job. Because I know, as well as every other manager who works in college basketball, the way that we're looked at and the way that we view our job are two completely different things. So talk about what that meant for you as a manager going in each day and working with the team.
Yeah, so my goal was to make, and I was with Coach Greenberg at Virginia Tech. My goal was to make his job and the staff's job as easy as possible. So, as much stuff as I could take off their plate, I did. I was in the office all the time. There were weeks when I worked 80-hour weeks, and wasn't getting paid a whole lot. But I loved it, to be around those guys and to learn. But my goal was to take as much off their plate as possible. I wasn't a big name player. I didn't have the cachet or the sexiest name or, the biggest pedigree. So I knew that I was going to have to work from the bottom up. And so I enjoyed it. I was around some high level players, some high level basketball. And the thing that I appreciated about it then, but even more so now looking back, is there's nothing that I'm going to ask my staff or my players or our student assistants to do that I have not done myself. Nothing. So, I took great pride in that, that I kind of had a blue collar mentality. My grandfather was World War II and Korea War hero. Was pretty decorated, but got injured in the war. And then when he got out, he worked in a factory for a really long time. And so we still have, I don't have it with me, but we still have his lunch pail. And so we give it out to guys that show grit and toughness. Guys put it in their locker. And so I kind of came up with a blue collar mentality and took that when I was a student assistant and a GA, and have tried to continue that now as a head coach.
So let me ask you this, because you're a unique person to be, a unique guest speaker to be on here as well, again, because you were a manager. So just thinking back to your time as a manager, what was one of the most ridiculous requests that you had as a manager?
I don't know if I can say it on here. No, I had to babysit coaches' kids, not Coach Greenberg's, but some assistant coaches' kids. I had to go pay a parking ticket for Greenberg once, or not a parking ticket. I take that back. Speeding ticket. I mean, I didn't pay it out of my pocket, but I had to physically go pay it.
Right.
Um, dry cleaning, wash cars, um, you know, all kinds of stuff. So, if you can think it up, I probably had to do it. But I took it all in good stride, and it didn't really bother me that much.
Yeah, I think some of the most interesting things that happen with us too were, guys showing up to practice and coach looking at you like, "Where's their practice gear?" I'm like, "Coach, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, you tell them to put it in the laundry bin, they take it home. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. But I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you."
Yeah, we used to pack their jerseys for them. And
That's
so we had a bag where we had every single jersey, the blood jersey,
jerseys and all.
extra shoes, extra socks, extra whatever. Because heaven forbid we have guys pack their own stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's another thing. Showing up to games and hearing people say like, "Amir, where are your shoes?" Like, man, like you're a basketball player. What do you like? How do you not have your shoes? So, like you said, just learning the first time and then ended up having to just make sure that you're preparing ahead of time. Like, all right, this dude probably isn't going to have his shoes. And then learning the lessons too. The very first game that I worked as a manager, I'd never been a manager before. I didn't know what that looked like. So showing up and getting on the job training, we were redoing the Deadman Center that year. So we played in Peters Hall, super small gym, and the AC didn't work properly and the heat didn't work properly. So it was humid as hell in that gym. And the guys were, anytime somebody hit the floor, it immediately turned into a hockey rink. I mean, guys are just sliding 10, 15 feet. It was literally like being in a high school gym. I don't know if you've been to Hampton, Sydney, in their old gym, but it was like being in Hoosiers. And so it was the same exact thing. And I'll never forget Brad Greenberg. So Seth Greenberg's brother, for those people who are listening that don't know, Brad Greenberg drafted Allen Iverson. And Greenberg, he was a personality. I mean, he could fly off the hinges in a second. And a guy fell on the court, and the ref turned and looked at us, and I need a towel. And this is my first game as a manager. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm sitting on the end of the bench. I'm like, I better find a towel somewhere. I don't know what to tell him. And so Ross Condon pops up. He played for Jay Wright at Villanova. Pops up, grabs a towel, sprints out into the free throw line in his full suit, and he's wiping up the court and comes back and sits down. And before the ref even gave the ball to Kenny to shoot the free throw, I see Greenberg coming down towards the end of the bench. I'm thinking he's subbing a guy in. It's not the case. He looks at us and he's like, "If you fucking assholes don't get up off your ass and clean up that sweat the next time a ref asks for a towel, you will never coach basketball anywhere." And I'm sitting at the end of the bench, first time, first game. And this is like the first interaction that I have with Greenberg. And I'm just like, I'm never, ever letting somebody look for a towel again. I'm going to be the first person out on the court. And even to this day, when I was a head coach at Indian River, when I was an assistant at Queens, none of the managers even had a chance. I sat with a towel at my chair for the rest of my career. And it was a
I had
great.
the pleasure of having Brad and Seth on the same staff together at the same time.
Oh, see, now that's a whole nother level. That's a whole nother level.
Yeah, that was fun.
And so was Cedric Smith with you guys?
He was, yep.
Yeah, Smitty's a good dude too. Yep, all those guys, they're absolutely great. So the question that I have for you, what was that like being able to? So you were a manager, you were a GA. What was that like when you first got your opportunity to go be an ops guy?
It felt like I was like in the club. You know what I mean? Sometimes as a student assistant or a GA, like you're on the staff, but there's like an inner circle sometimes it feels like. And so I felt like I was, kind of in the club, and got to be really involved at UNC Greensboro in that role. And to be honest with you, it really wasn't a whole lot different, because I'd done a lot of the operation stuff at Virginia Tech too, with travel and camps and stuff. So it was just a more glorified GA position. But I did get more involved with the recruiting piece, especially on campus, and the recruiting meetings, and the coaching stuff, and just different game planning things. Coach Dement, who I worked for at UNCG, he always wanted to watch the game film right after the game,
Yeah.
so that made for some late nights. But I enjoyed it, and just kind of viewed it as kind of the next progression.
So when you finally, and this is a question we ask everybody, when you finally got your head coaching position, and everybody knows what that feels like when you first get your head coaching position. If you don't know yet, you'll find out. Like when you get that head coaching position and you're an assistant at first and you're thinking to yourself, I've got all the answers, man, why his coach isn't doing this? We should be doing that, this, that, and the third. And then you become a head coach. Who was the first coach or the first team to bust your ass and really make you realize, like, man, I got some work I need to do?
Mm, Good question. Probably Middlebury. They're ranked fourth in the country, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they beat us by 40 on New Year's Day.
There you go.
Um, that was a rough one. Um, yeah, it's a different feel when you become a head coach. Kind of feel a lot more responsibility, weight of the world's on your shoulders. And in some ways, I wish people could become a head coach before they become an assistant, because as a head coach, there's a lot of things, or as an assistant, you think that you have all the answers, when you don't have all the information to have the answers in a lot of cases. And so, if I ever went back to being an assistant, I think I'd be a better assistant because I'd know what a head coach would need, and I could anticipate that a little bit better. Um, as assistant, you think you have all the answers. You think, oh, I've got this great zone or this great play or whatever. But as a head coach, a lot of times you've got more information than the assistants have on certain situations. And so, my only advice would be, or not my only advice, but a big piece of advice that I would have is, for those of you who are assistants, is give your input, but do not take offense if it's not taken. It's not personal. Um, it's not that we don't like you. Sometimes you're going to suggest something and your head coach is going to do it. But there's going to be a lot of times where they don't, and it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your idea per se. You may just not have all the information, and so so temper some of your expectations, on kind of how your input is received. We'll take it, digest it, and sometimes it's great, and we do it. I didn't understand that all the time as an assistant, and so becoming a head coach is kind of like becoming a father. And I've got two kids with a third on the way. You can read as many coaching and parenting books as you want, but until you're in that position, you really don't know what you don't know. And so, when you do become a head coach, don't go too fast. Don't try to fill your roster in 1 week. Take your time, be patient in making decisions. And a lot of times things will happen and take care of themselves organically without you having to, you know, input yourself into every situation. And so, those are things that I didn't understand as an assistant, um, that I was able to kind of figure out after becoming a head coach, not before.
Yeah, we've had a couple of head coaches come on here as well and actually talk about when they were an assistant, the head coaches that they worked for truly valued their opinions and their thoughts. And like you said, you might not always be able to get your thoughts implemented. I know I was listening to John Gruden talk one time, and he was saying that when he was on staff with the Packers with Andy Reid, they used to compete all of the time to try to get a play inside of the playbook on Sunday. And Andy Reid always got a play in the playbook on Sunday. And John Gruden, for the life of him, could not get a play in. And one Sunday, John Gruden gets a play in the playbook, and they actually score off of it. And he's walking down the aisle of the plane when they were going back to Green Bay, and he dropped the play in Reed's lap and said, "Hey, Reed, add that one to your playbook." And I thought it was really cool because you've got assistants kind of competing with each other to bring out the best, right? And so I thought it was cool. But Gruden's one thing that he said was, just because it's not implemented doesn't mean that the coach doesn't value it.
Correct.
And I thought that that was a really big piece to take away from him. So my question for you is, the coaches that you worked for, who were some of the people that really helped you the most along the way?
Well, my dad helped a lot. Um, and I never worked for him. I just kind of grew up with him. Um, Rod Jensen was actually the associate head coach at UNC Greensboro. He's played a big role in my development as a coach. Um, I think Greenberg by far is the best that I've ever been around as far as scouting reports and finding weaknesses and breaking down tape. So he was great with that stuff. Josh Schertz, who I worked with at LMU, who's now the head coach at Indiana State, was probably the best holistically, like in every area, just the detail. And so I learned different things from different people. The scouting piece a lot from Greenberg and how to kind of break down tape and find weaknesses. Um, I feel like I learned kind of how to treat people from my dad and from Coach Jay. Kind of how to love on people and some of the things that dad did as a head coach. Taking care of kids. Giving rides. Giving shoes. Giving stuff that they couldn't afford. So seeing some of that stuff had a big impact on me. And then as far as becoming a head coach, like a CEO of an organization, I probably learned the most from, and I was only with him for one season, but I probably learned the most from Shirts.
Okay. And so you talk about those, you instantly mentioned it, and it was a great segue into our next question. You talk about all of those things that if you go to college, you don't learn about it, where they don't teach you in a classroom about taking care of kids off of the court. They don't talk about it. And it's just something that you learn, for the lack of a better way to say it, baptism under fire, right? How are some of the ways, or what are some of the things that you do to build meaningful relationships with your athletes and your coaching staff? And are they different?
Yeah. I think they have to be, I think the approach is the same, but they have to be a little different. Um, for us, I want the relationships to be genuine. Like you said, I think your staff and your players got to know that you care about them. I think the biggest thing though in developing relationships with your kids is you've got to be authentic to who you are. Um, I'm not Greenberg. I'm not Shirts. I'm not my father. Um, I'm who I am. And so if you try to be somebody that you're not, kids aren't stupid. Like they can see through that. And so if you're not being genuine in who you are, I think a lot of times players will be like, well, like he's being fake about this. Like, I'm not going to trust this dude. Um, you don't have to know every single detail about your kids' lives. I think sometimes there's a healthy distance as far as like knowing every detail about what they're doing every minute of the day. I think the biggest thing is your kids got to know, as far as your players, they got to know, and your staff too, that you care about them. You know, I'll talk to guys a lot of times, and very rarely off the court does it have to do with basketball. Sometimes it does, um, but it has to do, with Fortnite, or, like what game they went to this past weekend. I've got a big thing with our guys, like when they leave campus, I don't even care where they're going, but they just need to text me or call me when they leave and when they get there. When they come back. That's a big thing for me. And I'm not perfect. I make mistakes every day, but I try to take the approach of, I've got a 3-year-old son. I want to coach the kids on our team the way that I would want my son to be treated. And I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Um, I'll chew into kids. I'll be sarcastic. I don't berate them. I'm not, I'll yell, but I'm never going to make it personal. Um, and so I think kids understand, that if you're trying, if you're making an attempt to treat them the right way, I think that goes a long way. And we're not perfect. Obviously, you can ask my wife. She'll give you a whole laundry list of things that I'm not very good at, or that I make mistakes with. But I feel like we're doing something right in the world of NIL and the portal and all this stuff. In 4 years of the portal, we've lost 4 kids total. 2 were walk-ons. 1 kid graduated and went to another school that had a master's that we don't have, and a 4th kid was a partial guy that transferred down to Division 3. So we're not perfect, but I would put 4 portal kids in 4 years up against anybody in the country. And so I think our kids enjoy the way that we treat them and have relationships with them, and the experience. And we try to make it as much about being a family as possible. I know that's a buzzword. I know that's a culture word, and everybody uses it. But I think if you treat your players how you would want your own children to be treated, I think that resonates with our guys.
Yeah, and I since our kids are very similar in age. My son's 2.5. My second son's 4 months old. That's why right now I'm pouring into them. I'm more focused on them, and just trying to keep my mind where my feet are. And I think you're right. I think as coaches, a lot of the times, especially when we speak to parents, we tell them that we have the best of intentions for their children. And I think coaches mean that wholeheartedly. But once you become a parent yourself, you do start to look at things a little bit differently, right? You have a little bit more stock in it. And I think you're right. I think if you can lead the way that you would want your own kids to be led, I do think that, athletes will start to see that you are truly authentic with the things that you're doing. And I think that authenticity goes a long way with them too, because I don't remember who said it, but they said that kids smell bullshit quicker than anybody else. And I think that's 100% spot on. Roy Williams, Dean Smith, that whole staff, they believe in no profanity. And I try to do my absolute best with having a good filter with it. But I also know that that's not who I am. I know there's going to be times where I never curse directly at my athletes, calling them a expletive word, but I know for a fact that I got a technical foul at Booker T. Washington one time because I'm sitting there watching the game. I was like, that's a bullshit call. And the ref came up to me and he was like, "What'd you say?" I was like, "What'd I say?" I was confused. And he was like, "You know what you said." I was like, "That was a bullshit call." Psh, gave me a tech. I'm like, "You asked me what I said." That's what you gave me a tech for? Like, all right, man. Like, but yeah, I think that authenticity is huge for when you are building and growing those relationships. So you talked about coaching at the different levels, and you also were part of a transition from a Division 3 to a Division 2 program. What was that transition like?
Yeah, I was actually part of a transition from USCAA to D3 at SUNY Canton as well.
Right. Yeah, you were.
Um, So it's hard. I think Division 3 to Division 2 is the biggest jump that there is in my mind. Um, you know, there's a reason that a lot of D1s don't play teams in our league. Our league is pretty comparable to the Big South or the MEAC. You know, you can plug and play guys from our league into, the SoCon, the Big South, like up and down. Um, Probably not the ACC, but it's been challenging because you got to do more with less against people who don't have less.
Right.
And so I think in a lot of ways, the culture is what's given us a chance. Um, we're just kind of a gritty, blue collar team. Our guys love one another. They play for one another, and we play really friggin' hard. So I think if you've got a good culture and your kids play really hard, I think that can cure a lot of ills. Our first year, we had 1.9 scholarships, and we won 16 games. We're down to Radford by 6 or 7 with a minute to go. They vowed they'd never play us again, and they've held true to that. They won't play us again. Our second year we had 3.8 and we won 15 games. We were predicted to finish last in the SAC, which is kind of like the ACC of Division 2. And with 2 weeks to go, we were in sixth. Lost our point guard, lost our best defender, and proceeded to lose by 2, 3. We were tied with the team that won the league with 3 minutes to go. And then one of those games you get punched in the mouth. So one of the 4. So, we ended up finishing a tie for 9th, but, we're right there to be top 5. And we returned almost everybody. So I think we got a chance to be good. We had a pretty clear path or a pretty clear plan when we made the transition about what we wanted to do, how we wanted to build it, and kind of what things that we wanted to point towards. And we stuck to that plan. And so far it's gone better than I think most people expected. And so I think we got a chance to make a big push this year and next year.
So for the athletes that end up listening to this, talk about, because there's sometimes there, and I hate to use this word, delusion, misunderstanding is what I'm going to call it. Talk about the prestige of still playing at a Division 3 or a Division 2 school, because a lot of athletes growing up, obviously rightfully so, they want to play for the Virginia Techs. They don't really want to play for the Radfords, but they end up coming to Radford too, even though, I love Radford. Carolina, Duke, Villanova, all those big programs. How much of an honor is it to actually still play Division 3, Division 2? Because we both know that the SAC is a loaded conference. There's plenty of highly competitive programs in the SAC. So just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, people have got to understand, what the levels really are. Most, I think I saw a statistic like 1% of high school basketball players or something go Division 2 or Division 1, less than 1%. And even Division 3. I mean, there's kind of a meld with Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. The top, 100 of Division 2 are better than the bottom 100 of Division 1. The top probably 50 of Division 3 is better than the bottom 50 of Division 2. So there's kind of a meld. And so I think there's just this stigma out there that if you're not Division 1, you're a failure. And that's not the case. I mean, there's a lot of dudes that are playing pro basketball that went Division 3. Our league, the SAC, has more pros come out of it than some of the low major Division 1 leagues. And so I think education is a big piece to explain to people what the level is. When I was coaching at UNC Pembroke, and this is one of my favorite stories in coaching, we were recruiting a kid who was pretty good in the Fayetteville area. And so, as high school kids are, especially guys, they were giving him a hard time. They're like, bro, you're better than Pembroke. You could go play at Campbell or ECU or, all these things. And so none of them had ever been to a game though, right? They know this because, 16-year-olds are the smartest group of people in the entire world, right? They know everything. We should probably cure cancer by asking 16-year-olds. I mean, they'll know it. So anyway, so the coach was an alum of Pembroke. So he brought the entire team down to watch a game. And this is one of my favorite stories. And so he gets the kids, I'm getting chill bumps telling the story. I love it. He gets all of his kids, varsity and JV, on the bus after the game. And he stands up at the front of the bus and he goes, now, how many of you dudes can play at UNC Pembroke? And the kid that we were recruiting was the only kid that raised his hand. And so, you know, a lot of it is kids just don't know what they don't know because they only watch ESPN, you know, or ESPN Plus or whatever. But, you know, we're on Flow Sports. We're one of 2 leagues in the country, Division II, that's on Flow Sports. So is the CAA. So is the Big East. You know, so we're on the same TV market as the Big East and the CAA, which you know, both are pretty high levels of basketball. And so, you know, I think just educating people, you know, and it's not necessarily just the level too; it's the experience. You know, you're not going to get an experience of being a college athlete really in any other sector. I mean, how close you are with your teammates, you know, being able to work through problems and issues in a quick manner. You know, you got to plan. Mike Tyson's quote, you know, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And so I think, you know, when you're part of a team, when you have to problem solve in real time, you know, when you can't go look at a book to figure out how to fix the problem, I think that not only gives you friends for life, it gives you a safety net for life, but it also helps prepare people for life. You know, and for us, we'll bring in guys, or we'll bring in people to talk about mental health. We'll bring in people to talk about investing. You'd be amazed at the amount of college kids that have no idea how to write a check. You know, we'll teach people how to write a check, how to invest, how to balance a budget. You know, we'll bring in business professors. You know, so you get some hands-on, real-world experience that I don't know that you really get in any other classroom. And so I think the benefits go far beyond what level did I play, but the experience that you have, I think, can pay dividends throughout your entire life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too is the exposure, right? Like a lot of athletes haven't seen what a true college basketball player looks like. They might have one on their team and know, like, oh, this guy's good, but they also know them at a very personal level. So there's a lot of kind of, again, misunderstanding for who they are as an athlete. I think one of the most powerful things that all youth level coaches can do is take their teams to observe a practice, to see what a college practice actually looks like. And it kind of sets the table for what the expectations are for actually being a college athlete. And with that being said, talking about actually being a college coach, I know right now you're on the road recruiting. Talk about what that demand is like. Not only, yeah, you have to go out and recruit, but what that demand is like on your life in general.
Yeah, I try to be as efficient as possible. And so normally in the fall, I'll make 3 trips. Normally one's through the Carolinas, one's through Virginia, and then the third one will be, you know, through Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, or maybe down to Georgia, Florida. Um, you know, I've also got a perspective. You know, I think sometimes, you know, everybody wants you to see their kid, see their kid, see their kid. But I think sometimes people don't understand. You're asking me not only to spend our university's money, but you're asking me to spend time away from my wife and children, right? And so I try to be as efficient as possible with it. I'm a little bit more old school, so I don't think, and this has nothing to do with my staff. My staff is great, but if I was being recruited, or if my son was being recruited, I'd want the head coach to come see him. And it has nothing to do with me as a person, but my position as head coach. I'd want the head coach to come see my kid. And it's great when assistants go see him. But for whatever reason, there's something different when the head coach is in the building to see a kid. And so for us, our assistants, do a great job of targeting kids, but I want to see them myself. A 4-year scholarship to Emory and Henry costs $200,000. So if I'm going to spend $200,000 on a kid, I need to see him. And so I think that's really important. We only offer kids, for the most part, very few exceptions, in person, most of the time on campus. Sometimes maybe that takes a little bit more time and effort, but to me, kind of the analogy that I give is I didn't ask my wife to marry me and become part of our own little family through a text message or a phone call. So why would I ask a player to come become part of our family through a text message or a phone call? Sometimes that can't be helped if they live so far away. But we just try to have kind of more of an intimate, personal connection. We don't offer a lot of kids, and so it's hard, especially with a family, but I try to do it as efficiently as possible. Film makes it easier, at least to weed out kids, not necessarily to offer. Um, but then during the season, I don't go out much. I let our assistants go. In the fall, I'll be out more. In the spring, I'll be out more. But during the season, I want our team to know that my focus is on them. I mean, you still have to recruit. I get it. But I'm not leaving our team during the season for me to go watch a 17-year-old kid play very often. If we have an off day, I may go, or I may do a quick down and back after a practice or something like that. But I'm not gone a lot because I want to be there for our guys and kind of be around. So that's just kind of how we do it, right or wrong. I don't know. That's just kind of how we operate.
Well, I think you offered a good perspective on it as well, talking about how it's a $200,000 investment, right? Like that's a good perspective for student athletes at the high school and middle school level to take in, that this isn't just, an offer because you're a good person. There's a lot of great people out there, but you have to be able to bring something to the table from a business perspective as well, because your family's livelihood is based off of, wins and losses to a certain extent. Now, how much of the portal plays a role into your recruiting as well? Because I know that's a hot topic in college basketball right now.
Yeah, traditionally we've mainly recruited high school kids and tried to develop them. In our program right now, we got 15 kids. Two of them, we also have a developmental team, a JV team. So two of them we bumped up. One of those kids is a transfer. But of the guys that were recruited to become varsity players, we have two kids out of our 13 that are transfers. So we try to do a lot of high school recruiting in the fall. We'll do some junior college stuff in the fall. And not that we wouldn't take a high school kid in the spring, but normally we try to really focus on the high school kids in the fall. And, if they pass or aren't interested, that's fine. And then, we typically will look in the portal in the spring, but again, we don't do it a lot. We've gotten one kid out of the portal, who's a 7-footer, who's a Division I transfer but we recruited him out of high school, and didn't get him. So when he went in, we kind of already had a relationship built. And then we've got one junior college kid on our team. But for us, our culture's in a really good spot. I'm not, I'm at the play. I'm too old to do the whole chasing great players with poor character. Like I ain't doing it no more. So, if you're going to mess up our culture, you can go be a great player somewhere else. So, most of the kids that we would get out of the portal are kids that we already have relationships with, like the kid that we got, or like I got to know their coach like really well. Um, kind of two things that I really look for when I'm recruiting a kid. The most important person I want to talk to, if I get the opportunity to in a high school, is the janitor. the janitor knows more about every kid in that school than the high school coach or the principal does about who they really are as a kid. So for me, the janitor is a great source of information about character of kids. And then the other question that I ask high school coaches are, would you let him date your daughter? So it's interesting to see their reactions when you ask that question. Um, but the janitor to me is the most vital person that I want to talk to when I go to a high school and see a kid. And then the most important question to me when I'm recruiting a kid to the high school coach is, would you let him date your daughter? And so, again, we're just, I don't know. It's probably not normal, but
No,
it's just kind of how we do things.
I'll be honest with you, I've never heard that before, but I love that perspective as well. So, just a couple of questions from the people that are here with us tonight. What do you think has changed about getting into the business in the last 10, 15 years or so?
I think in a lot of ways, there's more opportunity than there's ever been because of the money, the resources. I mean, when I was at Virginia Tech, we had three assistants, we had an ops guy, we had coach, and then you had video and a couple GAs. So that's eight. I went to a Virginia Tech practice last year, and they got like 20 people. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Um, so there's more money, there's more positions, more people can be on the floor. Um, and the other thing that I would advise too, for those of you that are getting into it, is try to find somebody um, that you'd want to work for. Don't just chase the paycheck because it does not matter how much money you make if you are miserable on a day in, day out basis. And so try to find good people in the business that are willing to help you. They may not be able to hire you themselves, but they may recommend you for a job. Coaches will be like, hey, I've got a spot open. Like, do you know anybody? Do you have anybody in mind? Like I may not be able to hire you, but one of my buddies might be able to. So I think, connecting, I think social media makes it easier at least. I didn't really, when I was at Virginia Tech, we got excited because the Facebook had selected Virginia Tech as we were like the 20th institution in the country. For those of you who are young, it didn't used to be Facebook. It used to be called the Facebook. And
Facebook.
you had to be in a college that was selected
Oh,
to have Facebook.
yep.
So social media has changed a lot. Um, I think that's made it easier to connect in ways. I think you got to develop organic relationships. You can't be a hammer and force it all the time. Some people are more busy, or some people are more willing or less. Like each individual is different. So who's willing to kind of be a magnet with you and kind of join up with you and invest, maybe not monetarily, but invest in your career? And you'll figure that out pretty quickly, who responds and who doesn't. Um, I think the more touch points you can have, the better. Go to practices. If you're in town recruiting, come over to our practice. Or other people that you're interested in getting to know. I think going to clinics are big. Again, I work the camp circuit. It's not quite the same as it used to be. Because of kind of the craziness and how people are nuts these days. You don't have a lot of outside people being hired for institutional camps. Um, so I think those are some ways, but be genuine. It doesn't need to be canned. You don't need to be a used car salesman. Be genuine and pay attention. Like if you're trying to develop a relationship with somebody, and you see that they got a big win, you know, um, shoot them a text, be like, hey, great win, and that coach will be like, oh, that's cool. They're paying attention. You know what I mean? Handwritten notes. I can never overstate that enough. Handwritten notes. I still have people that I forgot that I wrote a handwritten note to 10 years ago that will mention it, in a conversation. That's going to mean more than any email, any text. Um, you know, when my wife and I got married, when we have kids, you have that registry. There's people that probably paid 50, $60 for something. I have no clue. I don't remember who bought us what, but I remember when somebody writes me a handwritten note. So I think those things can never be overstated. And then just be genuine with your approach.
Absolutely. This is a unique question. It says, would it be wise to break into college coaching when you have a young family?
It depends. You're going to have to work for the right person. Um, you're not going to be able to work for a lot of the people in the business. Again, when I got into business, I was working at Virginia Tech 80 hours a week. So if that's the case, no, absolutely not. That is not a good scenario, because you're going to be, you're not going to be able to be good at your job and be a good dad or a husband, and you're probably going to lose your marriage along the way. Um, so if you value that, um, you're probably going to have to work for somebody that's more understanding. I read the book by Tony Dungy, Quiet Strength, and it changed my perspective a lot in coaching, because like I was brought up with a blue collar mentality. You just work and grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, and that's just what you do. I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I'm a person of faith. So I related to Tony Dungy. JB, you mentioned about the cursing thing. I don't curse. Our players get in trouble when they curse. And so that's who I am. And so I related a lot to him. And he had an approach, and I'm not exactly like this, but he had an approach where he would kick people out of the office. And I know college is different than pros. He would kick his entire staff out of the office at 5 p.m. Like, done, go home. Because he wanted every staff member to be home for dinner and to be with their family. And so, if you can find a person, working from home is easier now than it's ever been. You can answer emails at home. You can watch film at home after your kids go to sleep. You can still get the work done and not have to be in the office all the time. And so I think you can do it with a young family as an assistant, but you've got to be very selective in who you decide to work with or work for.
Yeah, I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Larry Blunt, who is a great coach, and he was saying the same exact thing, that he's gotten to a point now to where when he chooses a job, it has to be a person who is of high character and somebody that he truly wants to work for. And I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of coaches out there with the mentality that you always have to be in the office, you always have to work. But I was on staff where I noticed that people were in the office and they weren't doing anything. And so, what are you actually doing there? So, you have to find a way, you have to find a balance to where you're being efficient. So, this way, you're getting your job done and you're not just clocking hours for no reason.
Not checking a box.
Exactly.
I'll share this. I'm not going to say who it is, because everybody in this chat would, or everybody in this Zoom would know who it is. But there was a coach in the Big Ten that worked at a school in Indiana with red uniforms and red and white striped pants. And he would, on his way to dinner, call his staff. He would drive by the office. And if your light was not on at 7 p.m., he would call you up and blast you and mother if you weren't in the office. So what their assistant started doing is leaving the lights on. He came in one day, found out that guys were leaving the lights on, and had motion censored lights put in so that he would know if people were really in the office or not. And like, I'm not trying to be mean or whatever, but that's more common than what you would think it is in college basketball. So you've really got to do your research on who you're working for.
No, for sure. You have to rig up something like Ferris Bueller if you're working for that person.
Gotta be something hanging on a fan.
Yeah, no. So honestly, it's just unnecessary. And so, what sort of characteristics or traits are you looking for when you're looking at assistants?
Yeah. So I want, yeah, the basketball acumen is nice. I think a lot of that can be taught through effort. For us, Um, I want a guy who's really high character, that I can trust around my wife and my kids, and someone that is going to put the program before themselves. To me, and someone who, I think putting the program before themselves kind of goes into loyalty as well. And everybody wants to talk about loyalty, but a lot of times head coaches don't want to give loyalty in return. And so, I think trying to find somebody that fits with our culture. You don't have to believe exactly the same way I do. You don't have to be exactly the same way that I am. But if treating people the right way and investing into the student athletes is important to you, and culture is important to you more so than talent, that's what I look for. And then someone who's going to put the Emory and Henry men's basketball program before themselves. Those are kind of the two biggest things for me.
So another person asked the question, I'm about to take an athletic administration master's course. Do you think that that will help them get a college coaching position?
I mean, maybe. I think I don't necessarily know that it's going to help you get a position, but it may help you understand the athletics administration from the other side once you have one of those positions. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I just don't know that it's going to help you get a job in coaching. Maybe it will, but I do for sure think it would help you understand the other side of the house a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. I think there's a big misconception with that about taking courses and not so much. And I think you would, if I had to guess, you would agree with this. It's more important to get on campus and work with the team than it is to take the course from a distance. So like if I took like an online course with some random team or some random college that's a couple hundred miles away, it would be more important for me to just go volunteer with a local team than to do that.
Correct.
So what are some, and just a couple more questions and we'll be done here. What are some of the most important steps you've taken in your career?
I think trying to reach out and develop relationships. Nobody ever wants to say this, but I'll say it. Is it honestly, in many cases, it doesn't matter what you know. It really does not. And it doesn't matter who you know. What matters is who knows you. And so, like I know Michael Jordan, but he don't know me. You get what I'm saying? Like, um, and so I think, you've got to network to a place where people understand and know who you are. I think that's big, but you've also got to be genuine with it. You can't force it, or you'll become annoying and you're never going to get a job with that person. Or with anybody they know, to be like, man, have you heard what so and so, what Joe did? Um, I'm looking for an assistant. I'm looking at this guy. He's pretty annoying, man. Like he's just relentless. So you don't want that. So there's a fine line of too much and enough. And so you got to kind of straddle that. I think doing stuff like this is great. Um, I think the basketball knowledge piece is important, and you've got to know your stuff. But once you get that job, it doesn't matter. I don't say it doesn't matter. You've got to tailor what you teach and what you coach to what your head coach's philosophy is. Like if you're a pack line guy, but your head coach wants to force everything to the sideline, you can't be out there teaching pack line, or, if your boss wants to ice, then you can't be out there teaching, like the high school Harry hard hedge, recover. Like you've got to also tailor. Now you don't have to change who you are. And when you become a head coach, you can do it how you want. But at the same time, you know, you've got to figure out, what does your head coach want you to teach? What does he want you to do? What you think is a good shot may be a bad shot to your head coach. And so you may disagree, but you've got to teach and coach what he wants or what his system is. And so, like for me, the worst shot in basketball is a long two. And so many of our guys, that come in, like they think it's a great shot. And, guys will shoot it and teammates will be like, great shot. I'm like, no, it's not. It's the worst shot in basketball. Look at the analytics, look at the efficiency.
I knew that was coming.
So people watch ESPN and the NBA and all this stuff. Well, there's a reason those dudes take that shot. It's because they don't have the open windows that we have in college.
Right.
And because that is their job. That's all they do. And it's still not a great shot, even in the NBA. So you've got to kind of tailor what you coach and what you teach to what your boss's system and beliefs are. Because when you become a head coach, you want someone to teach your beliefs, right? And what you want. And so, I think networking, I think figuring out what you believe, but then also figuring out, what your head coach wants, I think is important. I think one thing that kind of goes, by the wayside, everybody wants to recruit, and those are great things. But sometimes the basketball stuff gets put aside, and I've seen it year after year. There's guys who are great recruiters and they get a head coaching opportunity and they're not ready because they haven't prepared for the basketball piece of it, or they haven't prepared how to talk to people. Like, you got to go out in the community, you got to speak at events. Have you done public speaking? Is that a class you've taken, or find opportunities as an assistant with, the blessing of your head coach to go out and find opportunities to have public speaking engagements. And then I think the scouting report piece, it's not what you want on a scouting report. It's whatever is important to your head coach. No, and you may be able to put input in and say, hey, coach, I'd really like to add this to the scouting report. And your boss may be like, that's awesome, man. Yeah, let's do that. Or he may be like, you know what, let's not do that. Sometimes too much information, they just get bogged down, and they can't handle it, so sometimes less is more. Some players might be able to handle more than other players, so, maybe you make that accessible to those guys, or defer to your head coach on those decisions. And so those are some things. Always remember, you want to take things off your head coach's plate, but always, check with him to make sure, you get approval before you do certain things. I think that's important. And it's not, it's not because the head coach is a dictator, or whatever. But when you become a head coach, it's our program, but it's also going to be your program. And so, you may have it want to run a certain way, and you don't have to be a dictator about it or anything, but your staff needs to understand what you want. Because at the end of the day, you can check the NCAA stats page. You don't get a record for assistants. The record goes on the coaches. If something stupid goes on and one of your players does something stupid, it's not the assistant's name in the paper, unless the assistant did it too. It's the head coach's name. And so, the head coach's name, for right or for wrong, is tattooed on the program while they're in care of it. And so you've got to make sure that you kind of cater things to what your boss wants. Because one day you're going to be in that situation, and you want to make sure that your staff is in lockstep with you. And so I think learning kind of those things can help.
Right. And last question that we have for you, again, this one's kind of unique. So they've been out of the business for a year now, started as a student manager, and then as an assistant. What do they do to get back into the game?
Yeah, I think you check with your contacts that you already know, like wherever you were a manager or a student assistant, I would go talk to them, talk to the people that you were an assistant for. I've networked with coaches, with athletic directors, associate athletic directors. Sometimes you got to tell people your aspirations. Like, don't assume that they know. They may not know that you want to get back in. I think talk to them. And doing, when I was trying to become a head coach, I had several people that were ADs or associate ADs at Division I, Division II, Division III. And one of the things that they said is like, if we're in your network, like, tell us, let us know that you want a job. We're not just going to assume that you want to be a head coach at this school or that school or whatever. You got to tell people, like, hey, I'm interested in this. If something comes open, please keep me in mind. And a lot of times you'll get like, oh, okay, like I didn't know you're interested in that. So I think start with your current network um, of people that you already have, and then continue doing some of the other things like going to practices and getting on stuff like this and emailing and writing handwritten notes. I think sometimes, there's not a perfect answer, but sometimes the way that you get back into the business is the same way that you got into it in the first place. And so I would just kind of retrace my steps kind of on that process. You're not going to go back and be a student assistant, but you may be going to clinics, or you may be going to practices, or getting the handwritten notes. But I think you got a chance to get back in a little bit more easily than you do to get in to begin with, because you kind of have that inner network.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You have that inner network, but the biggest thing, as you've alluded to this entire time, is making sure that those relationships are genuine. And I think the only thing that I would add is that making sure that you are providing value. Because if you're not providing value and all you're ever doing is just asking for things, I mean, you're gonna run your course with that as well. Last question, Coach, and we'll let you get out of here. If you could have anybody on the Hoop Study Masterclass, who would it be? But you have to help us get them on here as well.
Huh. Um, who would it be? Has Shirts done it yet?
Shirts has not done it yet.
You'll, you'll laugh for like 60 minutes. But you'll learn a lot too. Probably Shirts.
Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, I love that answer. I'd love to chop it up with him too, especially after facing him when I was at Queen's University of Charlotte. Those were
He's one of the smartest people in college basketball and one of the funniest at the same time.
nice. No, we'll definitely love to have him on here. Coach, we really appreciate you pouring into our community tonight. Just a reminder for everybody, if you want to catch the replay, it will be on the Hoop Study YouTube channel. You can go on and find that. Please make sure that you tune in to Emory and Henry games this year. Coach Thompson will be leading them to another successful campaign.